Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for your patience as we resolve the tech issue on our end. I'm Camille Moore with Connect, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Extreme Engagement, Creating Irresistible Meeting Experiences for Maximum Impact with Ava Diamond. Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping notes on the platform. You can type in your questions for Ava in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen or via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. A recorded version of this session will be on demand on our websites, where you can find additional on-demand webinars for any of you needing last-minute credit hours before CMP testing. Yes, you are able to watch our sessions on demand and still receive credits. For everyone joining us live today, this credit was approved by the EIC. We will email those certificates tomorrow evening. For any of you future viewers watching this session on demand and not live, please email me directly at cmoore@connectmeetings.com to receive your certificate. I'll share more information about our upcoming webinars at the end of the program, but let's go ahead and get started. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ava Diamond. Let's begin with a few questions. Do you want to more effectively design meetings that maximize participant engagement? Are you ready to learn some specific ways to increase the ability of your speakers to engage your meeting participants? Do you want to know about some really cool and innovative meeting designs? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are in the right place. Ava's background includes 10 years with a global Fortune 50 computer company and over 25 years working with leaders to increase their effectiveness and their bottom lines. When she is not speaking on leadership and employee engagement, you can find her hiking, kayaking, making art, and playing with her rescue dog, Willow. How adorable. Helping us learn how to create an extreme engagement in our meetings, please welcome leadership speaker, consultant, and off-key but enthusiastic singer, Ava Diamond.
Thank you so much, Camille, and thanks to all of you who are joining us. I know you have a lot of choices as to how you want to spend your time, and I'm glad you're choosing to spend some time with us. So I'm going to start right off the bat by asking you a question to get an idea of where we are and where we're starting. So I'm interested to see how many of you feel like you have nailed it. You are excellent at helping your speakers deliver engaging programs. Your speakers rock, they're interactive, they know what they're doing, and you are so good at designing meetings that are creative and experiential and immersive. So that'll be some of you. Some of you might be sitting there going, well, you know, I could use a little bit of improvement. My speakers could really use some help to deliver interactive, engaging programs. And honestly, I could use some improvement myself because designing experiential, immersive experiences is pretty new for me, or I'm not that great at it. So I think we have a poll to see where you guys stand on this. Let me hit that button. So which of these two characteristics describe you the best? Okay, we have 100% so far with improvement. Welcome. So that's good, because that means that you're open to hearing some tips. And okay, great. So we have 5%, one person who said they nailed it. So that's great. Maybe they can join in if they have some great ideas as we go forward. But most of you are saying, you know, I could really use a little help. Some suggestions would be welcome. And so I'm glad to share some ideas with you. Oh, great. We have 2 people that are nailing it. So that's wonderful. So let's move forward and let's see. That slide did something weird. There we go. So what I'm curious, and you can type these right into the chat box, what are the 2 big things that you think people come to meetings for? Because that'll form the basis for what we're going to discuss as we move forward over this hour. So you can type those right into the chat box. What are the two big things people come to meetings for? Yeah, I'm seeing education, I'm seeing networking, I'm seeing an escape from work, information and networking, hearing new ideas and networking, and absolutely, you all nailed it. They come for two things. They come for information, education, new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, building their knowledge base, and they're looking for new things that they can apply immediately. And they're also looking for relationships that benefit them. So networking is one thing. Meeting new people is one thing. But we really want to give them a way to engage with the people that they're meeting so that they are creating mutually beneficial relationships with each other and they are learning from each other. So then if we all know this, because you pretty much nailed it in the chat box, if we all know this, then what's stopping you? I mean, what is standing in the way? What obstacles are there for you to creating these immersive, interactive, engaging experiences? Because I don't know about you, but I'm going to a lot of meetings where this is not happening. So we have a poll for you. What obstacles are standing in your way to create an engaging experience? And there may be some others, but let's just choose from this group. So I'm going to wait just another moment for these to come in. So it's looking like the majority fear that they won't participate. And I'll tell you, if you design it well, that's not likely to happen. A lot of people are saying no time. And what I will tell you is that it doesn't take any more time to design something that's engaging and interactive than it does to design something that's not and is kind of boring. And about a quarter of you were saying you don't know how. And that's great, because I will give you some tips today. And I'm going to talk about it from two perspectives. The first perspective is, how do you bake it into the design? How do you, as the meeting planner, design things that are interactive and engaging and immersive? But the other is, how do you skill your speakers to be able to do that? So I see people are typing things into the chat box. So issues with too many people at your events, and we can talk about that. Cost. Many of the ideas I'm going to give you aren't going to cost you an extra cent, and space at your venues is limited. That's a valid point, but a lot of the things I'm going to suggest to you won't really take any more space than you're already contracting for. So let's see, let me just get to the next slide. Yeah, these are the things I hear most from the meeting planners I talk to when I present this session live at different meetings. And one that I didn't put in your poll because we had a limited number I could put in there, but some say, I don't want to look stupid. You know, I don't want to design something that doesn't work and then I'm not looking good for my client. So that's a fear that people have, that they're used to doing it the way they do it, and they've been really successful at that and are not necessarily into experimenting and taking risks and doing something new because they don't know how they're going to pull that off. So let me talk about how we're going to spend the time we have together. We're going to talk about how to think about what you want your audiences to think, say, and do differently, because that's critical to designing an effective meeting. And then we're going to talk about, well, how do you align those speakers? And many of you have both professional speakers and then internal or industry speakers. How do you get them aligned? And how do you get them to not just be talking heads on the platform? And then how do you design meetings so they are so irresistible that the best stuff isn't happening in the hallway? Because we all know, we've been to meetings where the best interactions and the best exchange of information happen in the hallway. And then how do you align your suppliers? How do you align your vendors? How do you align all of your stakeholders? So take a moment to just look at which one or two of those are the most important to you, because that will activate the reticular activating system in your brain, and you'll be tuned in to internalizing those things and hearing the things that are most important to you. So let's start with, what do you want your audience to think, say, or do differently as a result of being at your meeting? And even deeper than that, what do you want them to feel? What do you want them to believe? Because if you start with this as the genesis of your meeting, that's going to create a different result than if you don't think this through beforehand. And then, what are your audience's pain points? What are they struggling with? What are they challenged by? What's making them nuts? What makes them sit bolt upright in their bed at 3 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat that they're really, really having trouble with? And then the last one on that slide is really important as well. And it's their unfulfilled desires. It's what do they really crave? What do they want to create in their work life? What have they not been able to get to or actualize or accomplish that they really want to? And these things on this slide are gold to you, because if your meeting is not offering them solutions to their issues and their problems and what they're struggling with, and it's not getting them closer to what they really want, then they're not going to be as engaged and they're not going to be as likely to come back. So how do you find this out, particularly for those of you who have huge meetings and audiences? Well, you can even put a question or comment box on your registration forms that ask people what are the top 3 issues they're facing, or what are the top 3 problems they would like to solve, or what are the things they would most like to learn at your meeting, so that you are getting audience-focused things that you can deliver to them. Come on, little slide, advance. There we go. And I would also suggest that you think through a strategy. What happens often is that meeting planners don't have a strategy or a trajectory for their meeting. What they do is they go, oh, who have I heard that's good? And then they ask their colleagues and friends, what speakers have you heard that are good? And they cobble together this group of speakers that they heard were good to make sure that they have excellent speakers at their event. But their meeting is not necessarily following a trajectory. It's not having a starting point and an ending point that will bring people to the place where they can resolve the issues or fulfill their desires or the things we talked about in the previous slide. And so you want to be strategic about how that meeting is designed and what speakers you bring in. And I'm going to encourage you to think about your role differently. A lot of people see themselves as meeting planners. I would suggest that you think of yourself as a meeting and event strategist. I had a conversation when I was doing research for one of these programs. I had a conversation with Joe Smith, who is the meeting manager at Stage One Events. And I'm actually going to look at my notes from the conversation because I want to represent him well. And he said, an event strategist considers, what do you want attendees to walk away with? What's the budget to do that? How can we add the most value? And he said that the role is really evolving. So I would suggest that you think of yourself as a consultant to your client, not necessarily doing exactly what the client thinks they want because they don't have your level of expertise. I would suggest that if you are going to be relevant and effective and successful in the future, that you really think about yourself as a strategist and a consultant who is there to solve problems, not just someone focused on space and meals and that kind of support, but broaden your definition of what you do and what you offer so that your meeting is solution focused, so that the attendees at your meeting are getting something of high value to them. So you're starting with that question of what do you want them to think, say, do, feel, believe differently, and then work backwards from there. Look at their problems and create solutions that are going to stick. So then you might be saying, well, that's great, Ava. So I can design a meeting like that. I mean, you're going to give me some skills, and I've got some skills, and I have colleagues for support. I get that that's how I need to design the meeting. But what about those speakers? How am I going to get my speakers on board with this way of thinking? And how am I going to get them to be engaging and interactive? And that's not easy. I speak in real life, I speak on leadership and employee engagement. And so I'm at a lot of leadership meetings, and I see some of these leaders in companies that come up to do presentations, and you could be snoring by about the third minute, because although they have good information, they are not skilled at delivering it in a way that really engages and speaks to the audience. So as the meeting and event strategist, as the meeting planner, it's going to be your role to partner with your speakers to engage people early, because you have the right to ask your speakers to help drive people to the meeting and increase attendance, to engage people while they're there and have a really interactive, meaningful experience, and then to reinforce the learning after the event. That is not unreasonable to ask of your speakers. So how do you do that? Well, you can ask them to do a video ahead of time, and it can say something like, "Hi, I'm Ava Diamond, and I'm going to be presenting on self-leadership, inside-out leadership at the so-and-so meeting. Let me tell you what we're going to do at this meeting. Here are the 3 things that you're going to learn. And you're going to be involved, and you're going to be engaged in whatever you want your speaker to say, or whatever that speaker can say to best present their session. But you want them to do a video that gets people excited, or you can have the speaker in that video throw out a few intriguing questions for people to think about before they come to that session, because you want them to generate some excitement and have people thinking about the problems they want solved before they even come to the session. You can ask your speakers to do articles for you. I'm actually speaking at MPI in Wisconsin in April, and the meeting planner has asked me, please write an article that we can send out to people ahead of time and begin to get them learning about this and thinking about this. That is perfectly fine to ask your speakers. You want them to create an experience during the session. You can also ask them if they would provide some kind of follow-on session, whether it be a webinar, whether it just be an audio Q&A session where after people have worked with what they presented for a couple of weeks, they can come back and ask questions and say, well, I tried this and I have questions about that. So these are all things you can ask your speakers for so that they deliver an experience. Don't just stand up there like a talking head delivering information in a one-way method that just doesn't engage people. You know what we find in today's world is that people they're getting way too much information, and they're not having time and space in meetings to engage with that information, to apply it to themselves, to talk about it with other people. And that's what we want to get out of. Now, I've got a question for you. True or false? The human attention span is shorter than a goldfish. You can type your responses into the chat box. The goldfish's attention span is 9 seconds. Is the human attention span shorter than that? So let me just frame it up in a way you can put in the chat box. True or false, the human attention span is shorter than a goldfish, which is 9 seconds. So everyone who's typing in the chat box thinks it's true. So you've been in my audiences. Yes, it is true. The goldfish is 9 seconds and the human is 8 seconds. Now, where does that come from? That comes from a study that Microsoft did that shows that people generally lose concentration after 8 seconds. And it's the effect of our increasingly digitized world. So Microsoft found that since 2000, it's gone down from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. So that's a little bit scary when you think about planning a meeting. I mean, if someone's going to pay attention for 8 seconds and you've got an hour talk, well, what are we going to do about that? Well, normally here there's a sound, but we couldn't get the sound to work in the webinar. So I'm actually going to sing this to you, which is a little bit scary. I'm going to sing you the sound that normally happens. And what it is there's a little music track and then a voiceover. So I'll do both for you. So pretend you're hearing it through this slide, and it goes do 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 do. Welcome to the real world. Do 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 do. Welcome to the real world. And in the real world, you can't have a talking head up there standing there for 60 minutes doing one-way conversation. You know, the event, your speaker, what you have people doing has to be more exciting than them sitting there looking at Facebook, or they're going to be sitting there looking at Facebook within moments of your speaker getting on stage. Now, I told you that Microsoft study said that human attention span is 8 seconds, but there are other studies that show that people have the ability to pay attention for 20 minutes. In fact, if you think about, if you go to a movie, that's usually a couple of hours, and most of us are not walking out after 20 minutes. And the research that came with this says that what happens is that people sort of re-up or re-sign up. Like if they're paying attention and they're engaged and they're enjoying what they're seeing or hearing, they'll sort of sign up for another 20 minutes mentally. And it's a very unconscious process, but that's how we pay attention, say, to a movie. But you also have to realize that commercials on television come in every 8 to 10 minutes. So whichever statistic, whichever study you're thinking about, the bottom line message is when someone is standing on stage, they need to shake it up every once in a while. They need to ask a question. They need to have people talking to each other. They need to show a video. They need to play a sound. They need to do something to just get people's, grab their attention and have them re-sign up for that next period of time. Because the mistake in designing meetings is to have things be a monologue, where you have what we call in the speaking business, a sage on the stage. You have, some expert on stage who's going to like talk at people for an hour. That doesn't work anymore in meetings. So a lot of people go, okay, well, we'll have a dialogue. Like I'll have Q&A and that'll help. Well, yeah, that'll help some. But what we really want is multi-directional learning. We want them to learn not only from the speaker, but from each other, because there is lots of expertise in this room and in any room where you have a meeting. When I do this session live, which is how I normally do it, it's not normally a webinar, I have several places during this 1 hour where I have people in trios, I have people in duos, I have people in quads. I have them talking to each other and learning from each other, because there's not only expertise from the speaker, but there's expertise from the people who are in the room, and you want to tap into that. And some of the more innovative meeting design formats have user-generated content where the speaker is not the primary one charged with giving information. They are really a facilitator of conversation in the room. And we will talk about some of those different meeting formats in a few minutes, because some of them are really fascinating. Some I'll explain pretty well. Some I'm going to suggest that you Google. So what I'm going to encourage you to think about, so that you can encourage your speakers to think about it, is that they are really there not only to do a one-way presentation, because you don't want that 100% of the time, but they're there to facilitate learning. They're there to engage peers in talking to each other. They're there in to generate discussion. They're there to ask questions to help people discover information on their own. And they're building in lots and lots of interaction. Now, some of you are sitting there saying, well, Eva, that all sounds good, but what about this guy? You know, we have industry speakers and internal speakers that they're not comfortable with any of that stuff. They're going to stand behind the lectern. They're going to have some notes or their computer, and they're going to read it. And in fact, they might even turn their back to the audience and read their slides. So what do you do with this guy? Well, or this woman. I'm not saying that's only men that do that. Well, one thing you can do is in your call for proposal, ask the presenter, what are the participants going to be doing? And I have actually filled out requests for proposal where it has asked me what % of the time will participants be doing that? So you can't just get away with going, oh yeah, I'm going to be interactive, but you really got to sit down and map it out and go, what % of the time are people going to be interacting with each other? And when I do this live, I pay very close attention to the ratio between how much am I speaking and how much are the attendees engaging with each other and then talking to me to process the information and make sure that they're applying it to their back home situation, because information is useless if they can't apply it right away. And then what's your role as the meeting or event strategist? Well, your role is to educate your speakers and support your speakers in operating in this new way. Now, some of you are sitting there going, well, that sounds good, Eva, but I have no idea how to do that. So let's talk about how you can do that. And it goes from the sort of almost free to a little bit more expensive. So one thing you can do, if you just have to do it yourself, you don't really have any money to invest, is put it together yourself. Create a speaker resource page that you can send your speakers to, where there are articles and videos and tip sheets and other things that will help to skill them. So how do you begin to put that together? Well, you have to do some research. It is going to be, even though it's not going to cost you a lot of money, it is going to be an investment of time to collect all of those resources. But then you have great information for those speakers. You have great resources for them. You know, they can look at videos. You can ask them to go through the stuff, and then you can have a webinar where you facilitate a conversation about what they've seen. So you can do this in a way that's very inexpensive yet very helpful for your speakers. Another thing you can do is you can use your internal training resources. So if you have people in your organization that are skilled, then you can have them create some webinars for your speakers. You might put together maybe a 3-part webinar series. You know, one webinar might be on how to facilitate a group discussion. One webinar might be on, you know, presentation skills. How do you command the stage? How do you engage the audience? How do you use the stage? Just all the good things that are part of good presentation. And then you can, for speakers that really need it, you can offer them coaching, either group coaching or individual coaching. Group coaching is really helpful for, giving everybody the same information all at once. Individual coaching is some of your speakers are going to need help, and they're going to need some practice with somebody who can help skill them. So if you have internal resources that can do that for you, offer those people coaching, because it's going to make all the difference in your meeting and the success of your meeting. And then if you don't have the internal resources, but you have some money to invest, the things I just talked about, you can do internally, you can hire out. So in fact, I offer that, and I'll send you a flyer about that if you request it after this webinar. But you can have somebody create webinars for you. You can have them create training for you. You can have them do the coaching for you, so that when your speakers and your presenters take the stage, they are fully in command of what they're doing. They are skilled at facilitating learning, and they are not going to be that guy standing behind the podium reading the information and reading the slides. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to spend a few minutes, and I'll just be silent for a few minutes, but spend 3 minutes or so writing down, what can you do out of the things I've talked about so far? What can you do to get your speakers to create more engaging learning experiences, whether it's DIY, whether it's internal, whether it's hiring it out? Normally, if we were live, I'd have you talking to each other about this in small groups. But since we're not live, I'm going to just ask you to write down some notes. And I'll just be quiet for about 3 minutes, as hard as that is for me to do. And for those of you who are finishing, if you want to type anything in the chat box of what you're going to do, I would welcome that. And I'm going to be quiet for about another minute. Okay, boy, that was hard for me to be silent for that long. Normally when I'm quiet, when I'm doing this live for a group and people are, doing some individual writing or something, I'm walking around the room seeing what they're doing. So it's been interesting just trying to sit here and be quiet for 3 minutes, not seeing any of you. So someone's saying, make facilitation part of speaker training. Yes. And I like the idea of a speaker resource center. Absolutely. We use an audience engagement tool with polls and do Q&A, but we usually do this at the end. How do we get presenters to use it throughout their presentation? You teach them how. And if necessary, you walk through their presentation with them and help them figure out points at which it would be useful to do that. I like the social media video with a clip to get people excited about the speaker. Yeah, if you have a speaker who's engaging on video, they get a sense of their personality, because sometimes when they read the course description, it's like, yeah, that could be good, that could be bad. But if you have a vibrant speaker who has good energy and tells them particularly what the deliverables they're going to get and what they might be doing during the session, so that they know it's not someone just talking at them for an hour, that's going to get them excited and get them to want to come. So I love that you're thinking about doing that with your meetings. So let's talk about how you create this irresistible engagement so that your sessions are more attractive than the hallway. The traditional model of meetings is truly outdated, because in the traditional model, what happens is the daytime is for learning and then the evening is for networking. So there might be like an icebreaker or some speed networking early on, but mostly it's people talking at them all day. And there's people with varying levels of skill. So some things are pretty interactive and engaging, and some things are just boring as crap because someone is droning on or reading their slides or standing behind a lectern for an hour. And so the real action, the real connection, the deep conversations happen in the hallway, because they're not designed into the sessions. And see, I believe you design that into your sessions so that people are talking to each other and learning from each other and building connection. And they're getting those two things we said people come to meetings for: information and education, and relationships that are going to help them in whatever they do when they get back to work. So by having them engage with each other in your sessions and engage with the presenter, then you're building in richness that otherwise isn't there. So you want to build all of this into your strategy as you're building your meeting design. I remember somebody earlier saying that they have huge amounts of people in their meetings. And for bigger meetings, it is sometimes a little tougher to create that connection. And one way, of course, is you have people working in small groups in meetings in your sessions, but that's not getting them exposed to a ton of people. So let me give you a couple of examples of my own professional association, and then let's talk about how you can apply them. So I belong to the National Speakers Association, which has thousands of members of professional speakers. And if you ever come to one of our conventions, you will not get a word in edgewise, trust me. But I always felt kind of lost in that organization when I first joined it 18 years ago, because our annual convention is huge. But then there are some ways to create connection. For example, we have a Facebook group called Power Women of NSA. NSA is National Speakers Association. Power Women of NSA, where women speakers congregate and support each other and help each other. And in fact, I just finished writing a leadership tips book. But when I started it a few weeks ago, first thing I did was went into that group and said, okay, who's done a tips book? What ideas do you have for me? What are the watch outs? What resources for editing and all that kind of stuff? Because I had my little community. It's a smaller group and I have relationships there and I leverage those relationships. Also, of course, I have my Colorado chapter, but within the Colorado chapter, we have something called mastermind sessions for our professional members. And they're not really mastermind sessions, they're more education sessions, but we call them mastermind sessions. But usually only about 20 people show up to those. They're once a month. And so again, it's a great way to build relationships. Now, you could go, okay, well, that's cool, that's NSA, but what does that have to do with me? Well, let's use that concept for a moment. How can you create smaller kind of affinity groups within your meeting? Groups of people that have something in common, that need to connect with each other, and how can you create ways for them to find each other, engage with each other, that's something to start thinking about. How can I create smaller communities within my big meeting so that people don't feel overwhelmed, particularly first timers to your conferences and meetings can be so overwhelmed. And particularly if they're introverted, it's difficult for them to form relationships and they're not going to come back. But if they're going back to see their friends, to see their colleagues, to get back in that community they've created, they're going to come back and you want them to come back. So think about how can you create smaller connections so that that's not only happening in the hallway. What you want to do is create opportunities for people to basically have water cooler conversations, right? You want to have these vibrant gathering places where people can connect and exchange ideas and learn from each other. Because if you fail to deliver on the connection promise, then you are losing out on a level of excellence and losing out on people coming back. So I want to spend some time going through some of the ways you can design this into your meetings. Now, normally when I do this live, these come in one at a time, but due to this platform and the way we had to do it, they're all here at once. I'm going to ask you to just focus on the one I'm talking to rather than focusing them on them all at once, because I don't want you to get all scattered. So instead of a 1-hour session, what you could design in is rapid fire learning. You might have 5 speakers who each get 10 minutes and they get 10 slides. That makes for a much more interesting hour. Or you can do Ignite style talks where each speaker has 5 minutes and they get 20 slides and they auto advance every 15 seconds. And I've done one of these. It's really challenging because you have to practice so much because those slides are going to move whether you're ready or not. You can do 10-minute rotational discussion tables where you have the room set up in discussion tables and people are talking in a small group for about 10 minutes. And then when the bell rings, they move to another table with new people. So they're learning from all different groups of peers. You can have TED-style talks, which are the shorter form talks. And they can be 18 minutes, they can be 20 minutes. I have done one of those, and I'll tell you, it's a lot more difficult to prepare for one of those than it is to prepare for a 1-hour talk, because you have to be so concise and you have to be so targeted and you have to be so well practiced to be able to deliver what you're trying to deliver in that short amount of time. You might have open mic sessions where you actually have a time where people can come up and deliver their expertise on a particular topic. Like they have open mic sessions for comedians and in bars sometimes for people to come up. Well, you can do that in your meetings and have people bring their expertise. You can have campfire sessions where people are sitting around. You can even build a little fake fire and again are discussing a particular topic and learning from each other and bringing best practices. You can have participative panels. A lot of times panels have a panel of experts up on front. So there might be 5 people up front. But what if you had an empty chair or 2 empty chairs and people from the audience who have expertise can come up and fill those panel chairs and share their expertise? Now, you know, it takes a confident presenter and a confident meeting planner because you don't want to lose control and you have to be able to manage that, but it's fabulous when you can do it. If you have people trying to solve a big problem, like maybe there's a major change in the organization, you can have them working on that problem. You can put them in table teams where they come up with like their team name and a symbol and they're working on a project all day and doing report outs. You can do knowledge or world cafe where there are groups of small tables and people are talking about a topic at a table. One person stays there for continuity and the other people rotate and the new people build on what the first people created. And again, it's a great way of doing user-generated content. Open space technology is the ultimate in user-generated content. There's no agenda when people get there. And you say, so what do you want to learn about or present about or talk about? And you build the agenda and you pull the presenters from within the room. I've done a couple of these for HP, and it is fascinating and very fun, but it takes a skill level. So you don't just do that without having any idea what you're doing. And then, of course, tech engagement tools. I don't use those as much as a lot of people do because I've had them fail on me, and I don't like unpredictability in my presentations. But for audiences love them, and when you use them really well, it's excellent at engaging people. Now, you might not be familiar with all of these, and of course, I went through them very quickly. So I would suggest that any of these that you're not really familiar with, spend 5 minutes Googling each one, because they are fascinating meeting designs that are not used very much. TED-style talks are used a lot, but a lot of these other ones are not used very much, and they're ways to really shake up traditional meeting designs. So I'm just curious if any of you have used any of these successfully. So let's do a poll and figure that out. So it looks like we've had a couple of people doing the rapid fire learning. We've had 5 people doing the discussion tables. We've had TED style talks. I expected we'd have some of those. Had one person doing open mic, one person doing campfire, a few people doing participative panels. Great. So it looks like you're experimenting with these a little bit, not a ton. It looks like discussion tables seem to be the one that's been used the most. So my challenge for you would be to Google what you're not familiar with, or ask me questions. Feel free to email me after this. You'll have my contact information at the end. Feel free to ask me for 5 minutes of my time to walk you through something on the phone. I'd be happy to. But I'd invite you to experiment with these and not just use the same old meeting design. So remember, I told you I was going to talk about this in 2 ways. I was going to talk about it from the design perspective, and then from the how to get your speakers on board perspective. So let's go over here. So here are some things that your speakers can do. And these are things that you can share with your speakers on your resource page or your coaching or whatever. And they cost nothing. They're so easy to do, except speakers, particularly industry speakers, don't think about it. So you can have them do a pair share. You just taught them a bunch of information, then you put them in duos and ask them how they're going to apply it, or if they've applied it, or whatever's relevant. Sometimes if I want to break it up, remember, I'm trying to change gears every few minutes. So sometimes if I want to break it up, I'll say to my audience, okay, what's one thing you just learned? And I'll have people raise their hand and shout out one thing they've learned in maybe the first half of my presentation. It just breaks it up. It breaks up the energy. It only takes a moment. If I'm speaking to maybe an engineering group where people aren't going to be as likely to just shout things out, I might do something like, what's one question you still have? And I'll have already put index cards on their seat, and they can put their question on the index card and pass it forward. Because there are some professions where saying you have a question makes you look maybe not as expert, and people are reluctant to do that. Or I might say to my audience, I might point to somebody and say, give me a number from 1 to 10. And let's say they say 7. And then I say to the room, okay, what are 7 things that we've learned so far? And pop, 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 like popcorn, we have them calling them out. Sorry, I have a line of things that are blocking the bottom of the slide. So I'm looking at my notes here to see what the next one is. Oh, learning pods. So if you are teaching maybe an all-day class where they're learning a skill, you can put them in pods so that they can be with the same people all day long. So you give them a piece of information and then they get with their learning pod and apply it and see how they're going to apply it back home. And then when I first learned how to be a consultant 30 years ago, and I was in a 3-day program, that's what they did. They would teach us something and then we'd go back with our learning pod and talk about it. And then they teach us something else. And we were together with those people. So we built relationships and we supported each other way beyond that class. You can give participation prizes. If any of you have been in any of my live sessions, you know I tend to hand out stickers, or I hand out $2 bills, or sometimes I bring Choco Love, which are these delicious chocolate bars that are made in Colorado where I live. And so the first person that says something, or when people contribute, I just give them stuff. And it just gives a fun energy. And it can be very inexpensive things. You know, you can go get like those miniature candy bars, a big bag of them for $3 or something. Ask an engaging question. I mean, if you're talking for a while and you're the speaker, ask the audience an engaging question so it'll make them think. You can have a koosh ball and toss it around and throw it through the audience and have them say one thing that they're going to apply as you get toward the end of your session. You can have a fishbowl where you have an inner group of circle of people and an outer circle of people, and you're leading a discussion between the inner circle and the outer circle, and you're having people move from place to place. That's when you can Google, because it will take me so long to explain it. But it's for smaller groups, but it changes the energy. You can give them problem scenarios where they can work together to, like case study kind of things, where they can work together to figure out a problem. Yeah, someone just put in their toss microphones. I forget the brand of them, but they're like these Catchbox, I think is the name of them. And you can toss those out into the audience and they can interact or engage or answer your question. And those are really cool. I think they cost about $300 if I remember, but that's a great idea that someone just put in the chat box. And, you know, you can do polls. You can do show of hands if you're like me and you don't always trust the technology, or you can use a tech tool. I just find sometimes that takes too long for people to get, and I don't want to invest the time. Some of the tech tools you can use are polls or a Q&A or a live Twitter stream. The live Twitter streams make me nervous because I've seen some really snarky stuff come up on those, but in some technology venues, they really like to do that. That makes me too nervous. I don't do that in my sessions. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to begin to make a few notes about this. Actually, I'm going to give you about a minute. So please either take a picture of this screen or write down those 3 questions, because this I'm going to really consider quote unquote homework. I'm going to ask you, which of these are you willing to experiment with, and why did you choose those particular ones? And question number 2 is real. What resistance are you likely to be met with from your clients if you're going to change up things that have been working for years, and how are you going to educate those clients? And then what about experimenting with new designs scares you, and how are you going to move through that fear? So take a moment to just make a mental note of these, take a picture of your screen, do a screenshot, whatever's going to be best so that you have these questions. I'll wait a few seconds and then I'm going to move forward. So we've talked about aligning your speakers. Now I want to talk about aligning your stakeholders, because that is so, so important. Come on, little slide, advance. There we go. I want to tell you something about one of Velvet Chainsaw's clients. Velvet Chainsaw is a consulting firm that does helps meetings for large associations. They're a consulting firm, and they have a large corporate client. And what this client does is when they have their huge annual meeting, they bring in every vendor, decor, AV, speakers. They bring everybody in for a 2-day planning session. They have 25 vendors to help plan and put together this meeting.
Your input is invalid.
Well, that's kind of weird. I don't know what that means. I just got a recording saying my input is invalid. I think this input is very valid. Okay, so they have 25 vendors that sit around for 2 days and plan. And this has been planned into the bid. Everybody knows it's going to happen. And then every day they have a daily war room at the beginning of the day for 15 minutes where they update the issues and they share ownership for problem resolution. Now, let's face it. Most of us are not going to fly people in for 2 days from all over the place to plan the meeting. But think about what you could do. Think about what would be the benefit of engaging all of your stakeholders, the AV people, the food people, the decor people, all your vendors and your speakers in having a series of planning meetings before your meeting. So they can all be on Zoom, they can be on conference call, but what if you got everybody engaged and excited and aligned from the beginning, and you created a shared vision together of what the meeting was going to be and what everybody's part was and how everybody was going to contribute. You want to tap into their genius. You know, your suppliers and your speakers have been to countless meetings. They've seen what works. They've seen what doesn't work. Why wouldn't you tap into that genius and use that resource? And when you solicit their ideas, they're invested. They have a level of ownership that they don't have if they just show up, do their thing, and don't feel engaged and aren't involved. So increasingly, you want your suppliers to be part of the strategy. When I did this presentation the very first time for IPEC, I interviewed Joshua Garcia, who's the director of national sales for the Broadmoor. And he said, you know, increasingly suppliers are part of the strategy because you want them to take ownership and feel like they have a stake. They're going to bring different ideas. They're going to bring different perspectives, and you create a better canvas together. And I love his way of thinking about it, that you're creating a better canvas together. So let's talk about how you take action. This again is quote unquote homework. So if we were live, I'd be having you in small groups talking about this, but since we're not, and I'm looking at our time, this will be homework because I have to wrap in the next 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to take a picture or a screenshot of this screen and do spend some time with these questions. How are you going to strategize more effectively to increase the engagement in the planning of your meeting? And then with your speakers, what's it going to take to make the education sessions more interactive and engaging? And then how are you going to align your stakeholders? So let me finish with a story. I do some volunteer work with an organization called Together We Can Change the World. And we go to Southeast Asia and we support women and children, health and education, and anti-trafficking. And in Cambodia, there are 6 million Cambodians, and half the country has iron deficiency. And iron deficiency causes dizziness and fatigue and death. 60% of the women are anemic. And and for them to fix that, supplements are $30 a year per person. So if you think if there's a family of 5, it's $150 a year, but their per capita income is just over $1,000 a year. So we provide them with these iron fish that you see the picture of. And the iron fish, the fish in Cambodia is a symbol of good health, good luck, and good health and happiness. And so when we give them the iron fish, they put it in the soup or they put it in the rice or whatever they're boiling. And it will last for 5 years. It costs $5. And it's a small thing that has a huge impact on the health of that family. So I have given you in this 1 hour together a whole lot of information, a whole lot of different ideas. You might be feeling a little overwhelmed, but what I would say is pick a small thing that's going to have a big impact and do that. Just do that. And then try another thing that's going to have an impact and do that. and get support and get help and let me know how I can support you. Because what I want is for people to never be bored in a meeting. And what I want for you as an event and meeting strategist is for you to feel comfortable designing incredibly engaging meetings and skilling your speakers to deliver incredible interactive sessions. So let me offer you a few things. If you email me at ava@avadiamond.com, I will send you those 2 slides with the light bulbs, both the design things and the things speakers can do. So you have those 2 slides. I will also send you a JPEG of the Iron Fish graphic so that you can have it, you can print it out and have it at your desk to remind you. And I will also send you a handout. So Nathan, you're welcome for the story. I will also send you a handout so that you have a handout summary, because some of you were probably taking notes. Some of you were probably just paying attention and not taking notes. And let's face it, some of you were probably answering your email and checking Facebook. So if you would like those 3 things, the handout, the slides, and the graphic of the Iron Fish, I'd be happy to send it to you. And I'm also going to attach, if you remember, there was do it yourself, use internal resources, use external resources. I'll also attach a flyer of how I can help you as an external resource. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to be with you. And my biggest hope for you is that you take those things that are the homework assignments and do them and really think about that stuff and send me an email with the subject line, send me the stuff, and no later than Monday, I will have all of that information out to you. Thank you again, and thank you, Camille, for inviting me and making this happen.
Of course. Thank you so much, Ava, for sharing with us today some great tips and tactics that attendees can use for their meetings. After this webinar concludes, you will be directed to a short survey. If you could fill that out, that'd be great for us to get some feedback for future webinars. And you can learn about Connect's past and upcoming webinars on our website listed on the screen now. For everyone joining us live today, the credit was approved by the EIC and you will receive your certificate tomorrow evening. It will not come today, but you will get it tomorrow. Again, if you're watching this on demand, please email me for your certificate. It will not come to you automatically. And if you have any questions, you can email me at my email that I just typed in for everyone. We hope you all join us again on December 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an informative session on influencer marketing with Rachel Steffen. Thank you all for joining us and have a great day, everyone. And thank you so much, Ava.
Thank you.